Hello everybody, this is Rob Redman of Prior Studios, and welcome to this is the first of a 3D artist tutorial. I write regular articles for 3D Artist magazine, and I get quite a lot of emails on a monthly basis from people just asking, is there a video version of your tutorial that we can follow along with? So I've been speaking to the editor-in-chief over at the magazine, and we've decided that yes, it's a great idea. There's not always going to be space on the disk to actually put the videos, so I'm creating this page on my site where I'll host the ones that can't be put on the magazine disc. The first one is on the UV mapping tutorial that I did, which was in issue 18, and it was quite popular, but obviously there's a few things that are going on and people want to be able to see the icons that I'm using and see the tools and palettes and maybe even just be able to follow along with it moving. So this is the first video, and let's get stuck right in. Okay, so I've got this very basic head model, and it's very simple. There's not all that many polygons, and it's just basically a cube with some extrusions and a little bit of reshaping. It's open at the bottom, and what we might want to do is just paint some details on. So if we wanted to paint on, like, I don't know, a sackcloth bump map, and maybe then paint on like a clown face or whatever it might want to be, we could do it in 3D by kind of using the body paint projection tools. But what if we want to take our map into a different program, or just have a little bit more control over where things are lying? Well, that's where UV maps come in. And if you're new to 3D and new to UV maps, what a UV map is a kind of a set of coordinates, which basically a 3D object like this is kind of flattened out, ironed out down a seam, so you can paint on a texture, and you can then take that texture map into Photoshop or another image editing program, and refine your image there, and then project it back onto your model. And the UV points correspond to the points of your model, and it kind of remembers where they are, so you don't get stretching and warping and things don't slip all over the place. And making one of them is quite daunting to some people, just because it's kind of an unknown tool set and they don't quite understand. So this is a very basic overview of how you can set up a map on a simple object. The first thing we want to do is make sure we're in edge mode, and what we're going to do here is define where we're going to make our cuts. So if you imagine this was made of cloth and we wanted to cut it and then iron it out flat, we need to just tell the software where we want our cuts to be. And a good place to start with a head is across the top of the forehead. So I'm just making a selection here, holding down Shift to add some more to my selection, and I'm just going to go across the top and right down the back of the head to the top of the neck where the model stops. Just bring this up so I can see it more clearly. Okay, so right the way across there. Oh, I've added one there. You can hit Control and select again, and that will deselect. Okay, so I've got this selection now. What do I do with it? The first thing to do is hit the V key, go to Selection and Set Selection. And what this does is it stores that selection in a tag, and you can see it's an edge tag because it's a black triangle with orange edges around it. And in the Attributes Manager, you've got Edge Selection as a name. Now that's not great for us because we might add 10 of these and they'll all be called Edge Selection. So let's call that Seam Selection. That's fine. And next we can deselect that now, it's not a problem. And we've got our head, so we need to now get this over into body paint. So if you come up to this icon here, which stores all the different layouts, you can go to where have I got it? UV Edit. So this is the UV Edit menu set, which is identical to the one that says BP UV Edit, except it's smaller just to fit in my recording window. And you can see a few different things that are different. If you haven't looked at the body paint menus yet, you can see there's a range of different icons across the top, and the viewports are laid out very differently. You've got some different icons here. So the Object Manager has moved to the bottom left from the top right. Attributes is in the middle here, and then we've got our dedicated UV tools palettes here, and an extra viewport which has got our UV grid in it. What we want to do, I'm just going to delete. There's already a UV map attached to that, so I'm just going to delete it. That's what you were seeing here. So when you bring your model in, you're going to have a blank texture, and this here, this grey square, is actually our texture which we could paint on. But we need to create a UV map for this model first. So you can use the paint setup wizard, which is this brush with the 3 stars. I'm just going to hit that and make sure that the cube has a tick by it, because it's the cube, which is the head object that we want to make a map for. Hit the next button. I'm going to leave those at default, and I've got colour and bump assigned here, so this is going to make us a bump texture and a colour texture, and this is the size of our texture, which is probably too small for a head in most places, but for this tutorial that'll be fine. So I'm just going to hit finish. This tells us what we've got, what we're doing, and the setup wizard has ended, which is fine, so we can press close, and you can see we've got our map here. Now we could just use the brush tool, and we could paint onto our model, and you can see that although the painting has worked fine and it's transferred over to our texture map, it's broken up because the model is broken up. So I'm just going to undo that. I don't want that painting going on, and I'm going to use the UV point edit tool, which is this one here, and once you hit that, some of the options over here in the UV mapping window, they'll become active. So we've got mapping, UV relax, projection, transform, and UV commands. First thing that we want to do is go to the relax UVs, and if you just use your selection tool, you can select these. Now they look different, so you might not originally think that they're selectable because they're black, but that's because they're UV points, but you can select them using the selection and the point UV tool. And what we want to do is just make a little bit more room over here. Okay, so what we've got is in the UV relax, there's some fields here, and actually I've got the wrong tag in here. This tag is from an old project which is just remembered, so I'm just going to clear that, and what we actually want is cut selected edges, which, if you remember, we set up our edge seams, is this tag here, which I'm going to drag across into there. I'm going to hit apply, and you can see what's going on there. That doesn't quite look right, and this is one of the strange things that you might find in body paint, and that's you have to be in the right selection mode. So at the moment we're currently using point UV mode. We want to be in polygon edit tool. So if you hit the polygon edit tool, come over to projection, and then use cylindrical, you can see, let's just bring this down so we can see this is actually spread out a little bit better. Now we can just select all of these. In fact, if we just go select all, we can then use our scale, move, rotate tools and just bring this in so it fits. Now I'm going to enlarge this, just because at this point of UV mapping you want to make as much of the text you've got as possible, because otherwise it's just lost detail. So I'm going to go back into the point mode, and just with my selection tool just going to grab a few of these points, move them around just to neaten them up a little bit. Now I'm just using the space bar to move between my selection and my move tools. Now this map itself is not too bad, but there's a few issues with it which you want to spend just a little bit of time tidying up. You can see we've got some overlapping going on here, which isn't great, so we'll just bring that down. I'm going to bring this one down as well, just like so, because you don't want overlapping. That's not good, and it will make life difficult for you in the long run. I would suggest spending a certain amount of time. I'm just going to select 2 points here to bring them down together, just kind of evening these out and keep them as regular as you can. You can go on for a long time doing this, but as a kind of a fundamental lesson, you want to keep them kind of fairly even. I'll just zoom out and see this. What's going on across the top there? That looks to me like this one could be moved. That's probably a bit better. Okay, so let's bring this to the front so we can see what we're doing. Now, I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me tweak UV points for hours. Well, on this head model it probably wouldn't be very long actually, but you get the idea. So now we can, if we go back in, let's just maximize this a little bit. If we take our brush tool, we can now brush right the way around that side of the head, and you can see that where before it was getting to this point and then splitting, and that paint stroke would actually be half over here and half up here. It's one continuous line. In fact, I can paint all the way around the head on the map just by painting a line, and if I come over here you can see that that line goes all the way around the head. Even if I paint across the top of a seam here, you can see it's looking exactly as it should. You can do the same across the back, and you've already seen one there. There you go, looks much better. And this way you could block in, say we were going to do something like the clown face, you could block in, you know, a nice smiley clown face. You could put in some eyes. This is a absolutely disgusting example, but you get the picture. So let's just go back into this UV map here. You've got you could paint in a very basic guide here, and then you could save out the texture by going to materials, and then you could choose your material. You've got the maps here. You can export these. Now, I don't think you can see this in the video, but if you come to texture here, actually, if I just click that, this was by right-clicking on the texture map icon at the bottom, and you can see that you've got a few different options. Not all of them are shown here, but if I click the drop down, you can go save texture as. So you could save this texture, and then you could open it up in Photoshop, paint in a more refined image than my wonderful face you've got here, and then once you've kind of created what you want to do, put any colour in there, you could use that as a guide for making all your other maps. So you could use that as a guide for your bump map, for a displacement map, whatever you want to do, whatever you need, specularity, all that kind of stuff, and then import them into the right channels back in Cinema 4D. Just save them all out as different files, different names. I tend to use just kind of my own internal naming method. So I'll put BMP for bump, and then disp for displacement, and things like that. So your model is UV mapped, and then we can go back to our normal Cinema 4D layout. Let's just bin that one, and you can see it's still there. Let's do a very quick preview render, and all the details are in place. So that's a particularly ugly but hopefully useful introduction to making a UV map in Cinema 4D. I'll just bring that into object mode so you can see how it looks when you're back in your normal tool set. I hope that's been of some use. I've been Rob Redman, and see you again soon for another Back to Basics.